Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I'm going to be showing you guys how to create a hotbar where you can press keys on your keyboard in order to trigger the buttons on each individual hotbar slot to cause the pressed events to trigger. So from a new project, we want to create a user interface for the hotbar. So I'll click user interface here as the root node in an empty scene. Let's rename this to be hotbar, and then I'll save this scene to the project. So I already created a folder called UI, so I'll just save that there, hotbar.tscn. And then inside of here, I'm also going to want a hbox container. So if we right click, add child node, hbox container is going to be a horizontal box container. So basically every element we put in it will go left to right in sequence. So good for stuff like a hotbar. Obviously you could do it vertically as well. Let's save that. Now for the hotbar button scenes, I'm going to be instancing it at least 10 times, possibly more if you have a whole bunch of rows of hotbar keys. So it makes sense to create a base scene and then re-instance it a bunch of times as we need for every hotbar key. So I'll create a new scene. This will be user interface, but I'm going to immediately change the control node to be change type and then button. So this button, I'll say hotbar button. So you can rename it by clicking it and doing F2 on Windows, I think enter on Mac. And we'll save this to the UI folder as well. So hotbar button. And what I'm going to want to happen with this button is that whatever shortcut key I've assigned to it, so you can see over here, I'm already filtering shortcut, but to see shortcut, you would just come over to the inspector and scroll down to shortcut and you'd have that here. I wanted to show whatever the first key assigned in this shortcut resource is to be the text that shows on the hotbar button. So for that to actually work, we need to add a script. So let's add a script to the hotbar button, hotbar_button.gd, saved in the UI folder is fine. Then inside of here, we'll do function ready. Let me zoom out a little bit. Okay, that should be a bit more readable. And we want to read the first event. So event is going to be equal to shortcut.events 0. And then I want to read whatever the event is as text, and we're going to set that to the text. So text equals event.asText. So the shortcut, we haven't created it yet, but over here, we'd be creating a new shortcut, and then it can take input events here. So I'm going to, for the template scene, undo this, cancel that, but we can give this a type input event if we want to make sure that it actually has this as text. So event.asText, yeah, should be able to work. So when we assign an event in the shortcut, it's going to display as text on ready inside of the buttons field here. So let's go to the hotbar, and I'm going to create an instance of the hotbar button by dropping this scene under the hbox container. We can see it doesn't have any text in there. So what we could do is in the base scene, we could just put like an X here if we want, and then that'll show up in this base scene. But okay, so over here, the button is pretty small. So I probably want it to have like a minimum size. So let's go to hotbar button, click on the button. And first I'm going to take anchors preset and change this to top left, and then zoom in a little bit. Let's take the minimum size, set the X to 60 and the Y to 30, I think would be good. And then we can go back to the hotbar and we should see it be a little bit bigger here as its minimum size. So the hotbar button, I'm going to want to assign a shortcut to that. So we want the shortcuts to be individually created for each button. Don't reassign the same shortcut to multiple buttons unless you actually want them all to be pressed with the same button. So the shortcut, we create a new shortcut in this drop-down menu, just like any other resource. We expand, we can see it can take an array of events. So we want to give it at least one event, which can trigger the button to be pressed without pressing left mouse button on the button itself. So let's add an event. It's going to be an input event key. And in here, we want to configure that. I'm going to set it to 1. And what should happen if I run this scene, so I'll run the current scene, is that it's going to set the text to 1. Okay, so basically it's showing whatever the currently assigned input key is as the button text on the hotbar. Yeah, and you'd probably assign stuff like an icon too. So if we drop this in here, then you could see like, okay, this icon, pretend it was an item or an ability icon. Then it'll say like, okay, use this ability, press 1 to do it. So yeah, just as a general sense there. Okay, I'll remove the icon for right now. So now we want to duplicate this 9 times to represent keys 2 through 0 on the keyboard. So just duplicate a whole bunch of times. Okay, I think one more. Yep. Okay, so we want to take these shortcuts probably and save them to our project so that we can edit the resource in a menu later on if we ever need to reassign what these hotbar button shortcuts are. So we can right click on shortcut, save this to the project, and let's see, inside of here, I might create a folder like UI/shortcuts, and then hotbar _1.tres for the shortcut. Okay. Now for these other ones, we want to go into here and we want to create brand new shortcuts. So right now they're all assigned to the same shortcut. Big advantage of resources, you can share them across multiple nodes in your game. But they need to have different shortcuts because they're different hotbar keys. So let's create a new shortcut. I'll go into here, create a new input event key, and let's set this to 2. Okay, so we need to do that and then save it for every single hotbar. So that's going to be 10 times or 8 more times in addition to that. So just kind of go through it, create new shortcuts, create new input event keys, and then assign it to 3 through 0. And then, of course, save the new shortcut. Okay, keep doing that. And then the last one is 0, of course, and we'll save the shortcut to hotbar 10 is what I'm going to call it. Okay, so we have these buttons. Let's run the scene. Since they all have a different custom shortcut assigned, you should see the key value for the event pop up here. So now you can press 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and trigger the buttons. You can also left click on them. Now, right now, the buttons don't do anything. So how do you make the buttons do stuff? Well, that is very dependent on what you need them to do. But one example could be that on a hotbar button, you could, like, let's say, assign an ability resource to it, and then using code that would go well beyond this video, you could trigger an ability to actually occur. So what I will show is how you could create a resource, read from that resource, and trigger that when the button is pressed. So let's create a new resource type. I will call the script ability. It will inherit from resource. And I'll create that. Actually, I could say class name ability. So advantage of resources is that you can store a bunch of information in there that is easily readable across anything in the game that is going to reference that file where the resource is saved. Downside of resources is that unlike nodes, you can't have them run functions like process and physics process functions or import functions because all of those depend on being a node inside of the scene tree. Most other code you can actually write inside of a resource, so it can have like scripted actions, functions, stuff like that. But it is limited. So with an ability resource, you might end up instantiating a packed scene which actually executes the ability. I've done that before, but I just wanted to kind of differentiate that. So this is the data representation of the ability. So resource is really easy to create and read information from it, like let's say a display name, which could be a string name. Oh, and we can make these exports so we can edit them in the inspector, of course. We could say export var mana cost, and this would be more like a integer. Export var damage, sure, we'll just make up a bunch of stats here. Default this to 0, let's default this to 10. You can make the damage a float if you want to do like decimal point damage. So anyway, if we go to the hotbar script now, we can export var a ability. So this will be the resource for an ability, and we can assign that into here, or during the game if we have a script that assigns abilities to these things. So we'll have like a new ability here for hotbar 2. So this will just say fireball, mana cost 10, damage 1000. And then in the first button, we'll just say new ability, basic attack, mana cost 0, damage 10.5. Let's just go with that. Okay, so when you want something to occur on a button on pressed, you can script it right into the button by doing function _ onPressed. And in order for this to actually trigger, what you would do is on ready, you would say pressed.connect on pressed. So we're connecting the event to the callback function on pressed. So when the button is pressed, we can call the ability, instantiate things in the scene, whatever you need to. So in this case, I'm just going to print some information about the ability. So let's say prints, and we'll say ability.displayName, comma, ability.manacost, comma, ability.damage. So if I remember right, that'll make them all into strings already, but let's go ahead and run the hotbar scene and see if that actually occurs. So I press 1, and then we can see in the console that basic attack was triggered. It has a mana cost of 0 and does damage of 10.5. So I could add in here like mana cost, comma, we go a little further, and we'll say damage, comma. So the prints method just lets you put a bunch of different strings, and you don't have to concatenate them. It'll just print everything as a string in sequence. So if we run this again, and I'll just pull this out of full screen real quick so you can see. I'll press 1, and then we have basic attack, mana cost 0, damage 10.5, and we use Fireball. So Fireball mana cost 10, damage 1000. We can press 1 and 2 on the keyboard. I think if we press 3, we're going to get an error because we don't have an ability assigned there. So you could add in some extra fail safes, like if ability does not equal null, then do this. Else prints no ability. Okay, so that would be one way to handle like the error. So now if we press 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, there's no ability, so it doesn't do anything. 1, 2. You could also disable the buttons that don't have any ability attached. There's a lot of different things you can do. So that in a nutshell is pretty much the idea there. If you script the buttons to do something on pressed, then you can put the code right into here. You could also access from another script when these buttons are pressed to do something. So like right here, connecting to the signal is something you can do from within the button, but as long as you have a reference to the button, you can connect to the button.pressed.connect from any other script you need to. So signals are pretty flexible in that way. That in a nutshell is about the basics of how to create a simple hotbar. So from here, I'd probably just bring this into your main UI scene. So if I was creating, let's say, my main gameplay, I might have a node at the top, call this gameplay. I might put a canvas layer under it, and then a root UI node. So control, rename it new UI, rename it to UI, and then just drop the hotbar in. Okay. So this UI, we could make it full screen. So you click on UI, inspectors, anchors preset, and now we can put the hotbar wherever we need it to. So let's take the hotbar layout and say center bottom. So that roughly works. Or let's see, do we want it centered? Okay, we could save this and the root as our gameplay. We might need to actually jump into the hotbar scene, and then we might need to take this HBox container and change its layout. So anchors, let's say center, right? And now if we go to gameplay, it's going to be in the center of wherever we position it. So maybe we actually want this to be center top. And then in gameplay, nope, looks like center bottom. Okay, center bottom, save it, jump back over, and there we have it there, pretty nicely anchored. So we could very easily just assign an offset. So if we want this to come up a couple pixels, we just decrease the Y value. And now we can set this as our main scene. So I'll run, select current, and in our main scene, we have the hotbar at the bottom. So 1 through 0, we can press all of those as much as we need to. We can left click them with the mouse like any standard button. And if we check our console, we should have a whole bunch of text printed out here from pressing all of those buttons. So that in a nutshell is the basics of creating a hotbar inside of Godot. Very simple setup, just reading data from the resources that are attached to each one, but being able to press keys 1 through 10 in order to trigger the hotbar buttons. So I've been Chris. I hope you guys found this tutorial helpful. If you want to download the simple demo project, I'll have it on my Ko-Fi and Patreon. Thanks for watching to the end, and I will see you guys in my future video content.